George Smith Patton Jr. did not become dangerous because he loved violence. That is the first misunderstanding people make. He became dangerous because he believed war had rules, and he believed most men were too afraid to follow them. From the time he was a young boy, Patton lived with the quiet weight of inadequacy. He struggled to read. He struggled in school. He watched other boys move faster than him, learn quicker than him, and speak more smoothly than him. What he did not struggle with was obsession. He memorized history the way other boys memorized games. He read about ancient generals as if they were living men he might someday meet. Alexander, Caesar, Napoleon. He did not admire them for their cruelty. He admired them for their decisiveness. They acted when others hesitated. They moved when others waited. To Patton, that was the difference between victory and death. He grew up believing something that would shape every command decision he ever made. Hesitation was not caution, hesitation was surrender wearing a polite mask. War, he believed, rewarded speed, clarity, and will, punished doubt. And as the world around him grew more modern, Patton's mind grew more ancient. He believed men had always been the same on battlefields. Fear still paralyzed. Courage still spread. Leadership still mattered more than numbers. Machines changed, weapons improved, but the human soul remained unchanged. That belief would make him one of the most effective battlefield commanders of the Second World War, and one of the most controversial men America ever put in uniform. Patton did not believe in fighting fair. He believed in fighting correctly. To him, the purpose of war was not to trade blows, but to break the enemy's will as fast as possible. He believed prolonged battles were moral failures, because every extra day meant more dead young men who trusted their leaders to know what they were doing. Speed, violence, and shock were not signs of brutality in his mind. They were signs of mercy. End the war quickly, and fewer mothers would receive telegrams. That philosophy hardened inside him long before the first shot of World War II was fired. When Patton entered the military, he immediately stood out. Not because he was loud, but because he was intense. He trained harder than others. He demanded more from himself than he demanded from anyone else. He polished his boots until they reflected faces. He memorized regulations so thoroughly that he could quote them while others flipped pages. Discipline, to Patton, was not about appearances. It was about preparation. A man who could not keep his uniform in order, he believed, would not keep his thoughts in order when bullets started flying. As tanks emerged as the future of warfare, Patton recognized their true potential before most of his peers. Others saw tanks as support tools for infantry. Patton saw them as instruments of decision. Mobility was no longer limited by marching feet. Firepower no longer crawled forward. War could move fast now, faster than human fear could adjust. And Patton intended to exploit that gap. He trained armored units to move relentlessly, to attack aggressively, and to never allow the enemy time to reorganize. "Hold the enemy by the nose and kick him in the rear," he famously said. Not as a joke, but as a principle. But philosophy alone does not win wars. It must survive reality. And Patton's philosophy would be tested brutally in North Africa. When the United States entered World War II, its army was inexperienced. Soldiers were brave but green. Officers were educated but untested. Patton was sent to clean up failure. After American forces suffered humiliating losses against seasoned German troops, Patton was brought in not to comfort, but to correct. He did not arrive gently. He arrived like a storm. Discipline was enforced immediately. Standards were non-negotiable. Sloppiness was eliminated. Fear was confronted, not soothed. Many soldiers hated him at first. They called him cruel. They called him heartless. But something strange happened over time. Units under Patton began to perform better. Confidence replaced confusion. Speed replaced hesitation. Men who once doubted themselves began to move with purpose. Patton did not promise safety. He promised competence. And on a battlefield, competence is comfort. He believed that soldiers deserved leaders who knew exactly what they were doing. Not leaders who sounded kind, but leaders who were decisive. Patton never pretended war was fair or gentle. He told his men the truth, that war was chaos, pain and fear, but that preparation and aggression could bend chaos into advantage. He taught them that fear was natural, but paralysis was a choice. Patton's philosophy made him dangerous not just to the enemy, but to the comfort of his own command structure. He pushed beyond doctrine. He challenged caution. He embarrassed slower commanders by succeeding where they hesitated. And that made him politically inconvenient. Superiors admired his results, but worried about his mouth. He spoke too freely. He believed too strongly. And he cared very little for appearances when lives were on the line. Nowhere was this more evident than in Sicily. During the Allied invasion of Sicily, Patton was supposed to support British forces. That was the plan. But plans, to Patton, were not sacred. Results were. When he saw opportunities slipping away due to hesitation and miscommunication, he acted. He drove his forces forward with breathtaking speed. He captured cities faster than expected. He outmaneuvered both the enemy and his allies. To Patton, victory justified momentum. But momentum without restraint has consequences. Patton's intensity, the same force that drove his army forward, also drove him past the line of compassion in moments of exhaustion and frustration. The infamous slapping incidents, when Patton struck soldiers suffering from what we now recognize as combat stress, were not acts of cruelty born of ignorance, but of belief twisted by pressure. He believed fear must never be allowed to spread. He believed weakness was contagious. And in those moments, his philosophy betrayed him. The consequences were swift. He was removed from command, publicly humiliated, forced into silence. For a man who believed action was life itself, punishment through inaction was unbearable. Yet even stripped of command, Patton remained dangerous because reputation itself had become a weapon. The enemy believed he would return. They feared where he might strike next. And the Allies quietly still needed him. Patton's philosophy had not failed. It had simply collided with politics. And when the war reached its most desperate moment, when Allied lines buckled under German counterattack in the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the call came. Patton was ready. He always was. Patton did not celebrate when the call came. There was no smile, no moment of satisfaction, only movement. To him, war was not a stage for redemption arcs or personal vindication. War was a problem that demanded immediate solutions, and when the Germans punched through the Ardennes in December 1944, it created the kind of problem Patton had been preparing for his entire life. The situation was dire. The German offensive caught the Allies off guard. Snow choked the roads. Fog grounded aircraft. Units were scattered, surrounded, confused. Bastogne, a vital crossroads town, was encircled. American soldiers were freezing, low on ammunition, cut off from relief. Many commanders saw only obstacles. Weather, terrain, logistics, time. Patton saw only direction. What made Patton dangerous was not courage alone. It was anticipation. Weeks earlier, he had already considered the possibility of a German counteroffensive. While others focused forward, Patton had quietly prepared for the unthinkable. His staff had plans ready, not because he had secret intelligence, but because he understood human nature. A cornered enemy, he believed, always lashes out. And when that lash came, Patton intended to turn faster than anyone thought possible. When Eisenhower asked how quickly Patton could pivot his Third Army north to relieve Bastogne, the room expected hesitation. Instead, Patton answered without pause. He said 3 days. The room fell silent. No army of that size had ever been turned and redeployed that quickly in winter conditions. But Patton was not guessing. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind long before it arrived. He had trained his army not just to move fast, but to think fast. And then he proved it. Orders went out immediately. Units that had been driving east suddenly turned north. Supply routes were reversed. Artillery repositioned. Engineers cleared frozen roads. Tank columns moved through snow and darkness. It was chaos, but controlled chaos. Patton's philosophy came alive in motion. He did not wait for perfect conditions because he believed perfection was the enemy of survival. Movement itself created opportunity. Momentum itself created clarity. As the Third Army surged north, Patton visited the front. He spoke to soldiers in blunt, unsentimental language. He did not tell them the mission would be easy. He told them it would matter. He reminded them that men were waiting in Bastogne, counting on relief not as an abstract idea, but as a lifeline measured in hours. Patton believed soldiers could endure anything if they understood why it mattered. When the Third Army finally broke through to Bastogne, it was more than a tactical success. It was a psychological reversal. American troops who had been surrounded and freezing suddenly knew they were not forgotten. German commanders, who believed winter had given them advantage, realized speed had stolen it away. Patton's philosophy had again turned time itself into a weapon. But speed came at a cost. Patton never denied that. His operations strained supply lines to the breaking point. Fuel shortages haunted every advance. Men were exhausted. Equipment broke down. And yet, Patton pressed forward because he believed stopping was more dangerous than continuing. He believed hesitation gave the enemy time to recover, to reorganize, to harden. As the Third Army pushed deeper into Germany, Patton's methods became even more aggressive. He exploited gaps relentlessly. He refused to let the enemy establish stable defensive lines. His forces crossed rivers under fire, seized bridges before they could be destroyed, and advanced faster than intelligence estimates predicted. To many observers, it looked reckless. To Patton, it was precision through pressure. What made him dangerous was that he understood fear operated on both sides of the battlefield. He knew his own men were afraid, but he also knew the enemy was terrified of unpredictability. A fast-moving enemy shattered assumptions. It disrupted planning. It created panic far beyond the physical damage inflicted. Patton's reputation moved ahead of his tanks. German units withdrew not always because they were defeated, but because they feared what might come next. Yet even as his battlefield success grew, Patton remained a problem for those above him. His comments about post-war politics, his blunt opinions, his refusal to soften his worldview made him increasingly isolated. He saw the war in stark terms. Enemies were enemies, and victory meant dominance, not negotiation. Where others looked toward peace, Patton still saw unfinished business. That disconnect widened after Germany's defeat. For Patton, the end of fighting felt unnatural. He had built his identity around motion, decision, and command. Peace required patience, diplomacy, restraint, qualities that did not come naturally to a man who believed action was moral clarity. He spoke openly about his frustrations. He criticized policies. He alienated allies. And once again, his philosophy, the same one that made him indispensable in war, made him inconvenient in peace. When Patton was removed from meaningful command after the war, it was not because he had failed militarily. It was because the world no longer needed the version of him forged by conflict. His danger had been situational. His brilliance was contextual. And without war, his intensity had nowhere to go. Still, even stripped of power, Patton remained convinced he had been right. Right about speed. Right about decisiveness. Right about the cost of hesitation. He believed history would eventually understand that wars are not won by careful language, but by clear action. That lives are saved not by prolonging conflict, but by ending it decisively. And then, abruptly, it was over. A car accident in December 1945 ended the life of a man who had survived everything war could throw at him. No battlefield death, no final command, just silence. For someone who believed life was motion, the stillness was cruelly ironic. But death did not erase Patton's philosophy, preserved it, because long after his voice fell silent, armies would continue to study him. Commanders would debate him, critics would condemn him, supporters would defend him, and beneath every argument, one truth remained. Patton had understood something uncomfortable about war and leadership, that decisiveness, even when flawed, often outperforms caution when lives are at stake. Yet this was not the full story, because to truly understand why Patton's philosophy made him dangerous, one must look beyond victories and controversies, and into the man himself. The contradictions, the fears, the beliefs that haunted him long before the war and followed him to its end. And that is where the story continues. Patton believed deep down that he had lived before, Not metaphorically, literally. He spoke of past lives on ancient battlefields with a seriousness that unsettled people around him. To many, it sounded like arrogance or fantasy. To Patton, it was explanation. It was how he made sense of the pull he felt toward war, the strange familiarity he experienced standing on old ground where men once fought and died. Whether those beliefs were truth, imagination, or coping mechanism almost didn't matter. What mattered was that they revealed something essential about him. Patton did not see war as a temporary condition. He saw it as an eternal human cycle, one that demanded leaders who could face its reality without flinching. This belief shaped his inner world. Beneath the polished helmet and sharp language was a man driven by fear. Not fear of death, but fear of failure. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of leading men into chaos without clarity. He carried the pressure of command personally, even when he pretended not to. Every loss weighed on him. Every mistake echoed. His outward toughness was armor, not indifference. He believed leaders had no right to show doubt because doubt spread faster than courage. That is why his philosophy was dangerous. Not because it was cruel, but because it was uncompromising. Patton believed leadership demanded certainty even when certainty did not exist. He believed hesitation communicated weakness, and weakness invited disaster. He understood that soldiers watched everything: tone of voice, posture, confidence, and he refused to allow ambiguity to poison morale. In his mind, a leader's primary duty was not to be liked, but to be believed. And yet, that same rigidity trapped him. Patton struggled with introspection. He was capable of reflection, but not softness. He knew he crossed lines, but he justified them through results. Victory, to him, was moral validation. If the mission succeeded, the method was proven. That mindset made him unstoppable in combat and inflexible everywhere else. He could adapt tactics instantly, but adapting his worldview was far harder. After the war, as the world tried to exhale, Patton remained tense. He watched politicians reshape narratives, redraw alliances, soften language, and he bristled. He believed the enemy had been defeated, not transformed. He worried that hesitation in peace would undo decisiveness in war. To many, his views felt outdated. To Patton, they felt consistent. He did not change because the battlefield changed. He believed principles outlived circumstances. This is why his legacy remains unsettled. Some see him as a brutal relic, a man whose methods belong to a darker era. Others see him as a necessary force, a reminder that leadership sometimes demands hardness when the world prefers comfort. Both views hold truth. Patton was not a moral philosopher. He was a battlefield problem solver. And battlefield problems rarely allow clean solutions. What made his philosophy dangerous was not that it ignored humanity, it assumed it. Patton believed fear was inevitable, confusion was natural, and death was ever-present. His response was not denial but domination. Dominate fear through action. Dominate confusion through movement. Dominate chaos through will. In his mind, that was compassion expressed through competence. Modern militaries still wrestle with his lessons. Speed versus caution. Initiative versus control. Decentralized action versus centralized planning. Patton's ghost lives in every debate about offensive momentum and decisive leadership. His name surfaces whenever commanders face uncertainty and must choose between waiting for clarity or creating it. And beyond the military, his story resonates because it speaks to something broader. The human tendency to hesitate, the cost of delay, the weight of decision-making when consequences are irreversible. Patton forces an uncomfortable question. Is it better to act imperfectly with conviction or perfectly with delay? History does not offer a single answer, but Patton offered his repeatedly, loudly, and without apology. He died believing he would be misunderstood in his time and recognized in another. In that, he may have been right, because even now, decades later, people still argue about him, still study him, still feel uneasy about the clarity he demanded. His philosophy refuses to sit quietly, provokes, challenges. It reminds us that leadership, at its core, is not about comfort, but responsibility. George S. Patton was dangerous because he understood that war does not reward good intentions. It rewards decisive ones. And whether admired or condemned, that truth remains as unsettling today as it was when his tanks first began to move. And that is why his philosophy endures. Thanks for watching. Kindly click the subscribe button